Hi, Jennifer Byrne here with a special guest who's a shade tricky to introduce because so many people, so many readers, feel they already know her. And that's because 8 years ago she wrote a book, a memoir really, which went feral. It sold 10 million copies and turned its title, Eat, Pray, Love, into a kind of inescapable cultural marker. And such an attention magnet, it rather blocked the view of the prize-winning short stories, books and magazine articles she had written before. Now she's travelling yet another path with a big, bold, historical novel about a plain-faced, sharp-brained girl born at the dawn of the 1800s. But before we hear about that, a warm welcome to you, Elizabeth Gilbert.
Thank you, Jennifer. It's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
First novel in 13 years.
Yeah.
Feeling good?
Yes.
Feel free?
Yes.
No more you?
Oh, it's great. It's so great. There was so much pent-up energy in me. I got my start as a fiction writer, and fiction has always been my love. And then I took this very sharp detour around the age of 30 into memoir, which, obviously turned out well, and I don't regret having done it. But it was a long time that I had gone without doing the thing that I love more than anything in the world. And so to return to it, and return to it in big form, as I did with this book, was really exciting.
Well, it is. Look, I've got to say, this book struck me. It's got a female heroine, Alma Whitaker, but it's the kind of book that they used to write about great men adventurers, right? Who they forget the spouses, they have their investigations, they go wandering the world. She's one of those great men, but she's a woman.
Yeah, you got it. Exactly. And I wanted to also retell the great 19th century epic novels that I love, the novels of Dickens, Trollope, Eliot, Austen, and yet be able to have a little bit more freedom with the female characters than those writers necessarily had. I wanted to tell a complete female story that doesn't just necessarily end with either the happy marriage or the destroyed reputation, which are usually the only endings that women got in the 19th century for stories about themselves. And so I wanted to say, well, what about the questing women? What about the adventuresome women? And they existed. And I wanted to write a book that honored that spirit.
And I like the fact that you invented a woman who was very plain. In fact, I think the housekeeper, when she was born, described as having a face like a bowl of porridge.
Yes. That's the face she kept for her whole life.
But the book actually goes prior to her birth, which is in January 1800, very much the dawn of the century. And her father, who makes all the money, so she's born rich, was an adventurer very much in the Australian heart because he travelled with Cook.
Yes, he did.
Americans aren't meant to know about Cook.
No, we aren't. But I happen to know about Cook because I came into possession of a family heirloom, which was my great-grandfather's. And I don't know where he got it, but it was this gorgeous 1784 leather-bound edition of Captain Cook's Voyages, published only a couple of years after the final expedition. And we had it in our house when I was a kid, and we were forbidden to touch it because it was the most valuable thing in our house. So, of course, we touched it all the time. 1784 was the publication of this book. And it looked like something from the Hogwarts library, It was this just big, exquisite, magical-looking book. And I loved it. Maps, ethnographic illustrations, botanical illustrations, all the original ship's logs. It's a real treasure. And when I was about 4 years old, by the looks of it, I got my hands on a pen and I scrawled my name on the inside of this book, thereby doing two things. One, absolutely destroying its value, and two, laying claim to it. And I like to think that it was a little message that I was sending to myself into the future saying, do something with this because the greatest story is in here. And so my mother gave me the book eventually saying, you ruined it. I guess it's yours.
Yeah, alternatively, you're just a spoiled brat.
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly. There's that too. I won't deny it. I think they're mutually compatible. I think you can be both things. So it came back into my hands, and then I just started reading it again, and I thought, I love this era. That period, the Age of Enlightenment into the beginning of the 19th century, was such an exquisite period for the study of natural history, even more than the exploration, even more than the cartography. What fascinated me was the botany and the idea that there was a trade in botanical exploration. And who were these guys who were taking these bold voyages? And so I started with one of those characters, and then from him came my heroine.
I sort of imagine that you have had a tremendous time researching this book because there's so much detail, so many one of my favourites is, at one stage, an Italian astronomer, a grand maestro, comes to Henry's estate when Alma is still a young girl, and he organises the guests, slightly drunk, to form themselves in the shape of the solar system. And Alma is given a sparkler, and is the comet, and she is allowed to cut across all their ellipses. It's only a couple of pages, but it's a beautiful description of the mood of the age.
Yeah.
Did that happen, or did you totally make that up?
Well, I read Keats mentions it. You know, I did such a wide, strange pile of research for this book because I wasn't only writing about botany, I also was just trying to get into, as you say, the spirit of the age. And I was also reading nothing but 18th and 19th century writing, journals, letters, trying to hear people's voices. And there's this tiny throwaway footnote, and I've never been able to get more details on it, but Keats has a memory of being a child and seeing a dance held on a yard in a big lawn outside where the guests were arranged like the planets. And it just was so, I mean, elegant and beautiful. And so I needed to, and I looked everywhere for the full description and couldn't find it.
Well,
so I had to invent it.
I looked up Maestro Ponticelli.
Oh, he doesn't exist. Yeah, no. the Italian astronomer doesn't exist in real life. But
John
he
Keats
needed to. But Keats saw that or seemed to remember seeing that as a child. And I thought that was exquisite and sublime.
We modern folk, we take the view that we're on some constant stage of advancement, and that things are always getting better. But when you look back at that time, it seems not necessarily so.
It's tricky. As a woman, I hold that there is no better moment to have been born than now. It's very difficult as a woman to look back nostalgically at almost any era in history because there wasn't really room for you. I mean, that moment that we just discussed about Alma being handed the sparkler and being allowed to run through is sort of a dream where her father says, you know, make a place for yourself, run across the universe. That wasn't really the message that women were given until very recently. So from that perspective, I am delighted to be here. I am delighted to have access to education, to literacy, to birth control, you know, to all of these advances that I do love. As a reader and as a lover of language, my personal feeling is that the middle of the 19th century was the human peak in the English language for beauty, and with all apologies to Shakespeare, you know, I do prefer, you know, I do think that, and there was a moment where there was a great deal of literacy and where everybody spoke well. If you could read, you read well. If you could write, you wrote well. When you read the letters that Civil War soldiers wrote to their families in the United States in the 1860s, they are beautiful. And people wrote constantly. It was their email, it was their instant messaging, it was their phone conversation. They were in this beautiful literate correspondence with each other. And the literature of that time represents that sort of heightened appreciation for language. And they were also I wanted to join that, you know.
And they were also discussing big issues. They were discussing, you know, evolution was being created, I mean, as a theory. Religion versus science, slavery was under discussion. They weren't screaming at each other. They were actually just discussing it.
Sometimes they were screaming at each other. And sometimes they were burning down each other's homes. I mean, it did get impassioned, but that idea that I replicate in the novel of these dinner table conversations, this sort of salon that Henry Whitaker and his wife ran in their estate, where they sought out the greatest minds of the age, and there were great minds to be found in that age, and they brought them to the table, and they put them sometimes in open combat against each other, or they forced their daughters to be able to sit and hold place at that table. And if you couldn't, you were asked to leave. You know, if you couldn't articulate yourself well enough to deserve a place at that table, you were off. And I had a love of that and a sort of nostalgia. My family was a bit like that, not so much with intellectual levels, but comedically. You know, if you weren't funny enough to hold your place at the table, if you couldn't get the laugh at the table, you weren't really welcome. But if you could, then you could join into this very raucous conversation. So I'm comfortable with the idea of a dinner table where there's an edge, and I like that. But I did learn how to tell a story and how to appreciate a good story because there was a lot of that going around.
And you were always going to write, I assume?
Yeah.
Always?
Yeah. That was never even a consideration for anything else.
Was there any other writer in your family?
No, but we were all readers, and well, my sister, who's 3 years older than me, is also a writer and a novelist. So I think our family was a bit of an incubator for that kind of thing. And we, our second home was the library when we were growing up. And I had a mother and a father who felt very strongly that reading was important. And we learned from an early age, because we also grew up on a farm and we had a lot of arduous chores. The only thing you could be doing where you would not be taken out of it and put to work, because if you were playing, it looked like you were bored. So it's like, oh, you're bored enough to play, then you can stack wood, like whatever the job was. But if you had your face in a book, there was some regard for that. They both had a kind of holy reverence for that. And I think that made reading both a refuge and a passion from a very early age.
When you didn't go off to one of those fancy writing courses, you were a can-do girl. You went out and you had experiences. You worked in bars. You worked as a cowgirl.
Yeah.
I'm told when you were working on the magazine that you actually, you worked as a man. You became a man for a while.
Yeah. A psychiatrist would have an interesting time picking that apart, wouldn't they? But yes, when I worked for GQ, I wrote for years. This is why it amuses me that I'm known so much as a chick lit author now. For years, I wrote exclusively for and about men. I wrote for Spin magazine. I wrote for GQ magazine. My first books were about very masculine topics. I was sort of fascinated with masculinity, to the point that I did a feature for GQ where I spent a week as a drag king, dressed up as a man, including a sporting, hidden in my pants, a condom stuffed with birdseed, which the drag king said was the best way to do it. I had coaching from an actual drag king, but that was a really fascinating.
Oh, that's what all the drag kings
called.
do.
Yes, that's what it's called. I mean, she knew. She said this is the way to get the appropriate heft. And to sort of feel like you're a dude. So, it was a fascinating experience to walk around New York City for a week as a guy. I enjoyed what I learned from it, although I didn't necessarily enjoy being that. It was interesting.
And I love that fact that you went on to become the chick lit, the queen of the self-help genre. Yeah. But it was blokes. You always wrote about men. What did you learn? What are the smart things you learned about men during that period when you studied them? You wrote that book, The Last American Man, about a super hyper macho modern day cowboy.
Yeah. There's a line that Ursula K. Le Guin said. She said, the flip side of heroism is sadness. Women and servants know this. I always thought that was a really beautiful line, and I learned that when the guy that I wrote about for the book, The Last American Man, is this, uber masculine outdoorsman, woodsman, who I really admired when I met, and who everybody really admires when they meet. But there's something sort of deeply lonely and tragic about that guy, and about the constant quest to prove your strength above all others, and the way he treated women, the way he treated anybody subservient to him was not to be admired.
And you felt that was the other side of being so hyper macho. So you, like you say, he was the Navy SEAL of a cowboy.
Yeah, I think so. And I've known some Navy SEALs, and I don't think there aren't a lot of them I've met who I would want to be married to or the child of. There are certain other aspects of humanity that I think are sometimes lost in that quest for ultimate male dominance, and after a while I stopped being as interested in that, and I started to be more interested in the different kind of heroism of women's lives, which was something that I had kind of neglected to pay attention to for a while, as I was essentially trying to live like a bloke, as much as I could for as many years as I could.
And then
Eat, Pray, Love, which was, of course, the very opposite direction as much as possible. Yeah.
And did you find, for all the fantastic results that came, the 10 million sales, you basically don't even need to work again. You're the Eat, Pray, Love woman.
Yeah.
But it changed the way people thought about you. I mean, I mentioned you had a life before that. You were a writer before that.
Yeah.
I personally preferred Last American Man myself. But
Thank
that's
you.
personal.
Yeah.
How did it change the way people thought of you?
Well, I mean, I definitely got ghettoized. I got stuck into the chick lit ghetto, and once I also do find it really interesting that when you write about, in America at least, when you write about men's lives and men's journeys, they give you nominations for the National Book Award, and when you write about women's lives and women's journeys, they shunt you off into the realm of chick lit, never to be taken seriously again, which is. It could be depressing, but I find it more amusing, and I also feel like
dead true though.
Oh, it's dead true, and I also feel like it's interesting that I'm at a point where I don't care, like I can afford not to really care. I don't need the approval of the 10 people in New York City who decide whether you're a serious literary figure or not. Because I have, first of all, my own sense of my own journey that I'm content with. And secondly, I'm a little embarrassed by the fact that I spent my 20s trying so hard in so many ways to gain the approval of men, whether it be the men who I was writing about or the men who I was writing for. That I wanted to be seen in their eyes as being a legitimate whatever. That it still meant something more when a male critic liked my work than when a female critic did. And I'm deeply embarrassed to say that now. It's dumb. It's so dumb. And the fact that these millions of female readers took me in and embraced me and trusted me means so much more to me now than anything else. And so I'm much less concerned about who's including me in some sort of rarefied circle than I am about who I'm including in my writing. And I will bring those female readers with me, I hope, for the rest of my life in whatever literary journeys I take, and never again somehow consider them second-class readers. I'm much more interested in them than I am in whoever is deciding who's a serious literary writer at this point in life. But the sadness that I feel tends to be for younger writers who are breaking their spines to try to impress those 10 or 15 people who are the sort of guardians of the cultural gate. And I just think, oh, honey, if you knew him, and that's the person that you're trying to win, like that's the person whose admiration you're looking for, oh, find somebody else to try to impress.
Okay, but would you feel that? And would you feel the confidence that you do?
Yeah.
Had you not written a super bestseller?
I don't know, because it's, that's going back and saying if your life had taken another path. I've always kind of followed the work that I was really passionate about, and that I'm proud of. Nobody's immune to the way criticism makes them feel. But I did write a multi-million-dollar best-selling book, but I also took a lot of crap for it. I also kind of got flayed in a way that has made me just not, it doesn't matter as much.
Are you even talking critically or personally?
Critically, yeah. Not personally, no. Personally, it's been great. But critically, yeah. I mean, and to watch myself go from being somebody who was on a path to literary respectability, and then...
Well, as you say, your previous book was nominated for the National Book Award.
Yeah, and the National Book Critics Circle Award, and the Penn Hemingway, and the Penn Faulkner. I mean, they were throwing all that kind of stuff at me until I dared to say, what would happen if I wrote an emotional journey about a woman's life? And then it was like, like they're holding up crosses and throwing holy water at me. Like I've done something really despicable. And I, even now when my dear friends who are in the literary world come out in my defense, I just think, even by you defending me, you're implying that I've done something transgressive, when in fact I did something that was really helpful to a lot of women. And why is that something that means my reputation needs rehabilitation? I think I can stand by that.
The big problem being, of course, and you've acknowledged it, is that you're unlikely, not impossible, but you're unlikely to go to those heights again. I mean, you may hit again at that sensational height, but it's not many people do get there twice. Yeah. Even Thomas Harris didn't get there.
The definition of a phenomenon is that it's once, and to be aware of that is to appreciate it as it's going on. And I think that I was so fortunate in that this didn't happen to me when I was 22. It happened to me when I was much closer to 40. It happened on my fourth book. It didn't happen on my first book. It happened when I was in my good marriage, not my dumb marriage. It happened kind of at the right moment where I was old enough and had been around enough to know this doesn't happen, and it isn't going to happen again. So love it and enjoy it, and then go and do whatever you need to do with your life, but certainly don't demand of destiny that this get repeated. And I also feel like I love my readers, and I don't want there to be any pressure on them from me that they have to twice embrace me with that kind of passion.
You wrote Eat, Pray, Love to Darcy, who was a girlfriend of yours. Yeah. So you said that was how you created that tone of intimacy.
Yeah.
By writing to a friend, girlfriend. To whom did you write The Signature of All Things?
That's such a great question. I've written every one of my books to a different person because I feel like that's how you find a warmth and personal voice, and it shapes the way that the book goes. So I wrote The Signature of All Things to my fourth grade teacher, Ms. Sandy Carpenter, the first feminist I ever met, the first passionate botanist I ever met, and one of the most avid readers I've ever known, who is still, at the age of 71, one of my dearest friends. We've stayed in touch since 1978, when I walked into her classroom and she ignited my mind. Up until that point, I had had teachers who were these sort of Depression-era, heavy shoe, cat's eye wearing, miserable people who were 1 year away from retirement and who hated their children in the classroom. And she was this vivid, she had short hair. She was the first woman I ever met who had short, bright dyed red hair. She wore bright jewelry. She was alive and awake, and she believed that there was, maybe this is where my populism comes from, she believed there was nothing we could not learn. And so we learned
nothing. We as people or we girls?
We fourth graders, we 9-year-olds. So she read Hemingway to us. She taught us the Latin names for every houseplant that she brought in to show us. I still know the Gettysburg Address and Wordsworth poems because of her. She fervently believed that with the right enthusiasm and the right passion, we could learn anything. And so I've stayed in touch with her my entire life. And she's also a fantastic reader. And she sends me she's, I would say, a broader reader than I am. And so she's always giving me recommendations for novels. And I wanted to give her the gift of a book that would delight every part of her. And the signature of all things is Every Inch for her.
This is just a random question. Reading A Signature of All Things, it structurally, maybe it's because we'd done it recently for book club, but it reminded me a bit of Jane Eyre.
I thought you were going to say, because you just did it in book club, I thought you were going to say Wolf Hall, which Hilary Mantel's book, which I can say very much influenced the telling of this story. So I'm glad that didn't show.
No.
But it is. It wasn't Jane Eyre, but I'm delighted for the reference. I think the main thing for me was that when I was struggling to figure out how to write a period novel, which I'd never done before, I read Wolf Hall twice in a row because I was trying to decode how she did it, and there was just this simple little equation almost that I finally got, and it opened up my whole possibilities with my own novel, which was. She wasn't trying to write a book that was purporting to be written in the 16th century. That would be incredibly affected and annoying. She was writing a contemporary novel about the 16th century, which did not have any anachronisms in it. So I thought, oh, that's how you do it. I'm just writing, I'm not pretending that I'm writing a Jane Austen novel. I'm writing a Liz Gilbert novel about that era. Nobody's texting anybody in that book, right? But the important thing is to just hold your own voice in a different time. So it's a subtlety, but it made it possible for me to do the work.
And in the end, just like Hilary Mantel had to answer endless questions about her hero, Henry, what is your view of Alma Whittaker?
Oh, I love her. I love her, and I know that it's, I've said before, and I'll say it again too, that I think the most transgressive thing that you can possibly say there are two, as a creative person. One is that you enjoy your work, and two is that you love what you've done. Those are it's so illegal to say that as a creator. I mean, we have been so seeped in German romanticism that we are here to suffer, and we are meant to be at war with our muses, and we are meant to be dissatisfied by what we produce. And I've always had such a different view. My work has brought me everything in my life, and it's filled me with. I've had the most amazing adventures because I've been a writer, and the most extraordinary experiences. And so why would it be so horrible to say that I am grateful to have been able to do this work, and that I love the character that I've invented, that she's part of me, and that I want the best for her in the world, and that I can't wait for people to meet her, And so that's the spirit with which I present Alma to everybody. Here's somebody I love. I hope you love her too.
Very last question. Why Lisa Simpson? Why do you love Lisa Simpson? I was looking at your Facebook. Lisa Simpson.
Well, I kind of identify with, I feel like the genius of The Simpsons is that I kind of identify with every single character on there, including Barney, the drunk. Everybody has a little bit of me in them on that show. But I was Lisa Simpson. I remain Lisa Simpson. I am the geek. I'm a nerd. I'm in a library right now. I couldn't be happier. I'm the one who's going to be correcting the grammar of the third grader sitting next to me. I'm that kid. I was the one who laid out her clothes for her first day of school and I made my mom take me to school an hour early because if they got started early for some reason, I wanted to make sure not to miss anything. So I love that she's become an iconic figure and that she's sort of a role model for girls like us.
And remains a source of inspiration for you, clearly.
Yes. I hope to die Lisa Simpson.
And who wouldn't want to be in the New South Wales State Library? It's a beautiful place to be. Such a pleasure to meet you, however.
Pleasure
Ms.
is
Gilbert.
all mine. Thank you, Jennifer.
Thank you. And that is our program for tonight. I hope you enjoyed it. I certainly did. And please join us again on the first Tuesday of next month for Regular Book Club. Until then, very happy reading and good night to you.